aerospace. All systems online.
Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier, and this is the Piracy Show. Now, with this week's show, I originally wanted to talk about the Redeemer. And I realized the Redeemer is kind of a touchy subject with a lot of people, because when you look at it and its history, there are certainly disagreements. Now, the Redeemer having won the next great starship has been kind of a sore spot with a lot of people, because there are a lot of people out there who wanted the Scimitar, who wanted the Brutus, who wanted this, who wanted that, and those ships simply didn't win. Now, when I was kind of looking at the Redeemer and I was kind of looking at the stats of it, going all the way back to the Vanguard video and doing the research for that, the value of the Redeemer really kind of stuck out, but it was something that I didn't want to crow too much about, because I knew that a lot of people would get mad, and for various reasons. I mean, there's a litany of reasons why people are kind of mad about the Redeemer, but in the end, the Redeemer is the ship that won. It is the ship that at one point CIG had voted out of the contest and the community voted it back in. And then that ship went on to win the contest. And some people have alluded to voting irregularities in regards to that ship and whatnot. But the truth is, I mean, the Redeemer came back from being put out of the contest to go on and resoundingly win the contest. So, despite some people's displeasure, I'm going to say, the Redeemer won because the community wanted the Redeemer. A lot of people liked the look of the Redeemer. Now, some people didn't like the look of it. Some people thought it was ugly. Some people thought it was, terrible. They didn't like the clamshell engines and whatnot. And the truth is, when you look at a ship and you digest its appearance, like, the appearance of the ship has nothing to do with the performance of the ship and whether or not the ship is good. Now, a lot of people, I don't know, they just seem to kind of get hung up on that. Like when I talk about the Herald, and I always show that image of the Herald as asymmetrical whenever I'm talking about the Herald, and that's it's a bit of it's a dig. It really is. It's a kind of like a little jab in the ribs. Like, hey, you remember when it looked like this? You remember when you sold it and it was this and then it wasn't? And it. I do get into the appearance of ships. I really, really do. But always in the end, what defines a ship to me is what are its stats. I don't care if the ship is ugly as hell. And today's show is going to deal with that a little bit. As long as its stats are good, as long as it makes sense as a ship, I can deal with any kind of look. And so, when I was looking at the Redeemer and I was thinking about the ship's stats, there was one ship that just kind of kept coming in from the side, and it's one of the ships that I personally, in terms of looks, I personally despise. I think it's the ugliest ship in the game. I've never liked it, but I am seriously considering owning it now, because when I look at the stats and I confront that, I go, looks don't really matter if the ship can deliver. And this ship is a ship that looks like it can deliver. And it was, as I was dealing with the Redeemer and trying to order my thoughts around the Redeemer, this ship just kind of kept coming in and saying, what about me? And then I had to deal with the fact that I was just excluding it because of its looks, but realistically its stats were even in some respects better than the Redeemer's, and it bore discussions. So in as much as I would like to deal with the Redeemer, we're actually going to deal with the ship in question, the ship that I don't want to like, but I do like because its stats are just so effing good, and that is the Freelancer MIS. Now, the Freelancer MIS, I talked about it a little bit in the Vanguard episode, but supposedly, according to the data sheet, you can get size 5 gimbaled guns, 2 on either side of the fuselage, which is a heck of a lot of firepower. But then you also have all the missiles that this thing can carry. And the fact that it has an auto-loading system to load more missiles out of the cargo bay out onto the wings so you can fire again. And think about that, Neil. What was it? 6 size 3 missiles, 6 size 2 missiles ready to go at any one point. And you might say, well, missiles aren't doing that well right now. It's kind of easy to evade missiles. Are missiles really worth it? But think about it in terms of, say, like torpedoes, or in terms of, say, dumbfire missiles. Like, let's say you're going after bigger targets, heavier ships, slower ships. Think about that Freelancer MIS with all those missiles out on the wings. If you can load those up with size 3 and size 2 dumbfire missiles and just make attack runs on large targets like that and strafe them with all those missiles, I mean, that's 12 missiles coming out all at once. Size 3 and size 2 just going right out the front and just tracking a course, and then hitting, more or less tracking a straight line and hitting an object. Or not even really, a lot of those have proximity warheads, or they do have proximity warheads right now, sorry. And all they really have to do is get close, and then they detonate. That ship really starts to look attractive. And the fact that that ship comes in at $165 right now, which is almost $100 less than the Redeemer and the Vanguard, with also cargo capacity, passenger capacity taken into account, that ship becomes more and more attractive the more you think of it. Really, it really does. And I've always had a bias against the Freelancer, because the Freelancer is one of the ships that I thought was ugly in Star Citizen. But I'm sitting here and I'm confronting the fact that I do have a prejudice against the Freelancer because of how it looks. But I have to admit, its stats are very appealing, and when you factor in the price point, it really is a ship that I have to pay attention to. I can't ignore it and say, oh well, Freelancer MIS, whatever, blah blah blah. No, I have to pay attention to the ship because it's an interesting ship. It has a lot of interesting possibilities. I don't like its appearance at all, but I do have to kind of acknowledge the fact that it is a very attractive ship, especially for its price point. Now, is it going to have the resilience of a Vanguard or the resilience of a Redeemer? Probably not. But it does have a heck of a lot of hitting power. And it's something that, going way back last time the Freelancer MIS was available, which was, I think, the anniversary sale, I bought a bunch of tokens to change a Freelancer, or change a Super Hornet into a Freelancer and back and forth, so that I could, play with that ship just to see it. And I don't know, I guess that was a bit of lucky forethought on my part, because now I really am having to kind of sit there and say, I want to see the ship in game now, because I want to kind of experiment with that loadout. Now finally, with persistence hopefully coming very soon, that might give me a chance to kind of mess with loadouts in the baby PU, and then hopefully once that ship arrives, be able to mess around with it. Now, when are we likely to see the Freelancer MIS? Well, the base Freelancer is more or less in the game as is right now, so that's something that we can definitely play around with. But I really haven't heard too much forward motion on the other Freelancers. Are they currently working on them right now? I think they are really tied up, because it's over in the UK that they're working on it. So they're really tied up kind of getting Squadron 42 together and trying to get that out the door. So I don't think that that's going to be something that we're going to see in the near future. I might be wrong, but I don't think it is. But hopefully it's something that we'll see soon, and something that we can test. Now, going back to the Redeemer, much like I've had to, confront and admit my prejudice against the the Freelancer, there is of course the Redeemer, and the Redeemer is definitely a ship that suffers from that. Because when you do look at the stats guns wise on the Redeemer, if you could more or less slave those turrets on the Redeemer to the pilot's control and the baby PU, if you can do that, that is a ridiculous amount of gun-based firepower on that ship. And with so many of those weapons being gimbaled or having the ability to be gimbaled, if you can unify those weapons, much like I'm doing here with the Super Hornet, you know, I've put on all M4A and M3A lasers on this thing, and you know, it's clearly doing the job. You know, when you look at the Redeemer, I mean, just imagine it as packaged as the ship that you wanted. Those are very attractive stats. Well, think about it this way. Like, you know, let's set that all aside. Think about it this way. If CIG suddenly came out and said, you know, we know there's a lot of people who wanted the alternates to the Redeemer. There's a lot of people who wanted the Scimitar, Brutus, whatever. Let's say you're a hardcore Scimitar fan. You want the Scimitar, and I'm just using that as an example because when I think about, you know, the alternate campaigns to get the other ships in, the Scimitar campaign has always been, you know, one of the most vocal, certainly. If CIG kind of came out and said, you know what, we're telling, what was it, IXM who did the Scimitar? We're going to these guys and we're saying, hey, look, if you can get your model up to our standards, if you can get your ship up to our standards and you can get all these animations done and get all this groundwork done to make the ship ready to be in game, we will put your ship in game and we'll allow people to take a Redeemer and do a one-for-one swap to your ship, or the Brutus, or, you know, whatever, whoever you wanted to win. Like, if those teams could bring those ships forward and bring those ships up to standard, and CIG said, if these teams can do it, we'll let people do a one-for-one swap from a Redeemer to that ship. Would you buy a Redeemer then? Like, if you could get all the stats of the Redeemer, the guns, the missiles, all of that packaged onto the ship that you wanted to win the next great starship, would you buy the Redeemer to do a one-for-one swap? Would you? Because remember, just think you're just buying the stats. Would you buy those stats? And the answer is probably, yeah, you would. Yeah, you would. And so maybe that's something to explore. Maybe instead of, you know, campaigning hard on CIG to, no, I want the Scimitar, no, I want the Brutus, whatever. Maybe kind of saying to CIG, hey, have you guys thought about the possibility of maybe letting these guys finish their work? You know? Have you thought about, you know, going to the guys who did the Scimitar and saying, look, we realize you got real lives, and there's going to be, you know, you've got time to do it, but if you can finish all of these things and we can check it out and say, you know what, yeah, you did it, it works, it's great, we can translate this very, very quickly and bring it in game. If CIG opened up the possibility of doing that, maybe that's the way to pursue this going forward, to get that resolved so that you can get the ship that you want. And they'll just say, but in the end, it will have the Redeemer stats. It'll be a one-for-one Redeemer, just in the skin that you want. Like, I think that, instead of, you know, kind of this constant attack on the Redeemer, I mean, look, the Redeemer won. The Redeemer's going to be in game. That's not going to change. You know, you can't stop the tide from coming in. It's done. It's written. It's going to happen. But I think that if you really want one of those other ships, I think going that route would be possibly your best chance for success. To get your ship is to say, hey, open it up, let these guys finish their work, and then just give us a one-for-one Redeemer swap. I think that's I think that would be the better way, and the better way to expend energy instead of like hating on the Redeemer. Is just campaign to allow these guys to finish their work. Because honestly, if you could do that, if you could go out and you could buy your scimitar tomorrow, and you looked at those stats on the scimitar and they were 1-for-1 what the Redeemer stats are, I think you'd be like, hell yeah, I would buy that. Hell yes, I would buy it. No questions asked. And that's when, you know, apart from you would be getting your ship, that's when you have to confront the fact that even though the Redeemer might not be the ship that you wanted in appearance, the Redeemer is a good ship. You know, just like I have to admit with the Freelancer, even though I look at the Freelancer and I'm like, dude, that looks like 2 lumps of Play-Doh stuck together. It's ugly. Its stats are undeniable. They are, and the Redeemer as well. I mean, think about it. If the Redeemer was the scimitar, if you looked in the store and it was IXM's scimitar or the Brutus or whatever, if it was that ship with those stats, would you buy that ship? Would you want that ship? Would you be excited to fly that ship? And I think almost universally the answer would be yes, I would. Yes, I would. So I guess that would be a great way to go forward with the whole Redeemer thing, is if you wanted the other ship, campaign to let the other teams finish their ship. I mean, obviously they have a lot more time to work with. They're not under the constraints of the original contest, so they'll have more time to finesse their work and do the work, and maybe they can get it to a point where CIG can just kind of pop, put on the finishing touches, make sure everything's kosher, and then put it in the game. I think that's the route going forward. Anyways, those are my thoughts and my musings for this week for the Piracy Show.
Quantum travel
I hope you guys enjoyed the show,
initiated.
and thanks for watching.